I stood up. I was about 4 feet in front of him, and he leaned forwards. "Well, he's not your fucking dad, is he? What I say goes. Understand?" He took a few steps forward and tapped my head with his finger hard a few times on understand. I shook him off. "Don't look at me like that, boy. I'll knock you senseless," he said, doing a half laugh. I realised why Nan and Alan didn't like him. I soon learnt Mum was only happy when she had a drink beside her. She loved the kids and played with them a lot, especially Jonathan, who Mum let know was her favourite. Jodie was in the playpen, dancing around in a little yellow dress thing, whilst Caroline was playing with her dolly and toy crib. Mum loved puzzle books, and did them as she played with Jonathan. I remember her clearly with her feet curled beneath her on the sofa. She was allowed that luxury, and although Wenzel complained when she doodled on the cover, she did it anyway. I remember having none of my toys at Bernie and Wenzel's house, who I'd started to call Mum and Dad, because I'd had to. In my head it was still Mum and Wenzel's. The longer I was there, the more I thought about Alan, and what he'd said about Liam. I never told anyone, of course, but I knew I wasn't like Wenzel. I felt very strongly that I didn't belong with this family. I loved Jonathan, Jodie and Caroline very much, although I was often mean to Caroline. That's how I'd been brought up. That was the way at Nan and Alan's, so we generally avoided each other. Dinner times were totally different. As soon as Wenzel came home from work, the 80s music, which was current then, would be switched off. The TV would go on. We weren't allowed to watch the snooker or boxing that he'd watch, and nobody wanted to watch Emmerdale apart from him. We'd have to sit cross-legged in a line in high order from smallest to tallest, facing the sofa, and wait for our food in silence. When he was home, it was his time, not ours. We'd had all day to play, and so we couldn't do that when he was home. Food would be placed in front of us, and we'd have to wait until Wenzel had received his. Then he would ask if we wanted salt. It didn't matter what was said, there was never any salt passed around. He would take a handful and sprinkle it on his plate and then rub his fingers together over our food, pretending to put some on. Mum wasn't a great cook like Nan had been, and most food was undercooked, if I'm honest. We didn't mind, but it gave Wenzel another excuse to pick on her. "What's this? It's not bacon, it's a fucking crack in the plate. Can't even cook properly, can you? At least you're good for one thing, eh?" He'd always phrase things so she would have to reply. She'd often try to ignore him, to which he'd make her respond, "Oi woman, I'm talking to you. I said at least you're good for something, aren't you?" She'd look at the kids, embarrassed. "Yeah," she'd say, and return with her food. When he picked up his knife and fork, we were allowed to start eating. If we started before, he'd stop us. "Think you're the man of the house, do you? Now you can wait until everyone else has eaten." Sometimes we'd get to eat after they had. Sometimes he'd just say, "Didn't want it, did you not? Fine then," and take it away. This happened to me a few times because I would throw my mind to Alan's when Wenzel was home, as I wasn't concentrating. He'd take the food. "No, I was just waiting for you guys to finish. I'll eat it," I said. I only asked once. "Should have thought of that before, shouldn't you?" He walked off with my plate, and I heard it slide into the bin. I had to be really careful at meal times. We all did when he was home. If we ate all of the food, we got insulted. "You're a gannet, you know that. You're like a big bin. Food costs money, you know. You think I work for my health?" If we left any, and I did a fair few times, because I didn't like peas or onions, then he'd go off on his favourite tangent. "There's kids in Africa dying who could have had that. You're nothing but a waster. You care about nobody apart from yourself. Don't even care about your old dad, do you?" I'd never reply. If I replied, I'd have to tell the truth. I do care about my dad, but my dad's living next door but one. I looked forward to going to Alan's, and when I was there we spoke a lot about going back to live with him, which is what he wanted. He told me all the time. "We just have to do what Wenzel says for now, that's all, lad. When you're a little older you'll be able to decide for yourself where you want to live." Of course I complained constantly, but there was nothing Alan could do. He wasn't family in Wenzel's eyes. I may have been at my parents', but my heart was with Alan. I daydreamed about living with him a lot, although sometimes I'd get snapped back to reality by Mother dancing with us. It was nice, I really enjoyed it, until she came too close and the alcohol from her breath caught in my throat. I didn't like that at all, but I loved the dancing. I'd not felt more connected, nor more free than when dancing with Mum, Jonathan and Caroline. It was okay for me to call her Mum now. and not just because I had to, but okay because I wanted to. I'd grown to understand her. She kept that straight face on because it was her protection against Wenzel. She could control whether to smile or not, what to eat, or if not to eat. Wenzel controlled everything and everyone. She needed a little space that was hers, and if she didn't have it outwardly in her life, she found a way to get it mentally. That was okay, I understood. We all wanted that, and it would manifest itself in different ways for all of us. Caroline had a stutter, and Mum had agoraphobia, an obsessive-compulsive disorder. I don't really think it was obsessive-compulsive disorder, though. She would hide the sugar and separate the coffee in 2 pots, so as one was for Wenzel and the other for herself. If you asked me, she just wanted something for herself that wasn't contaminated by her husband. It was food time again. Mum had brought the last plate of food in for herself, and sat on the end of the sofa in the corner of the room, Wenzel beside her. "Smile," he said, looking at her. "Miserable cow, smile," he added, when she didn't smile. Mum ignored him. Usually she'd give him a half-second smile. She hadn't, and everyone had noticed. This wasn't good. I'd learnt to be very aware of body language, and this was not good at all. Wenzel's shoulders were up. He relaxed them and prodded Mum with a fork in her arm. "Ow!" she said, pulling away and shooting him a look. He did it again. "Don't, that hurts," she said. "That doesn't hurt," he said, laughing. Prodded her again, this time in the forearm. She pulled away and put her knife and fork down. "Oh, don't be silly, I'm only playing," he said, grabbing at her hair and pulling her down towards him. He held her as though in a headlock, but without putting any pressure on, and they let her go. Mum was holding her plate steady, as Wenzel played the idiot. Mum sat up. "You find it funny, don't you?" he asked the kids. Of course, if we didn't reply, we'd get hit. If we said no, we'd get hit. So we said yes, or worse, if we acted scared in any way. That was Wenzel's thing, fear. He thrived from it. "You're not scared of me, are you?" he said in such a way he'd made it sound like you weren't before, but you soon will be. He continued to prod Mum with the fork until she threw the meal on the floor and stormed into the kitchen. He followed, calmly rising from his chair and giving us a very brief, "I know what I'm doing," smile, before he went into the kitchen. I didn't see what happened, but there was screaming coming from the kitchen, and it wasn't Wenzel. Chapter 7. I wanted to be back with Alan so much. I wasn't allowed out of bed apart from to pee at Wenzel's, whereas at home I'd have had the run of the house. If I set foot on that landing floor and wasn't heading to the bathroom, I'd get slapped around. I don't remember the first time it happened. I do remember how the skirting board looked close up though. I'd seen it enough times before I learnt to close my eyes quickly with my head between my arms and my legs tucked up. I'd learnt to curl up pretty quickly. I knew the sounds of Jonathan turning over his sleep, Caroline having another nightmare, and the difference between Wenzel's trainer and Wenzel's bare feet on the floor. I had to. I didn't want him behind me without me knowing he was there. That said, I didn't relish the thought of being in bed either. I couldn't get out of bed, literally. If my foot hit the floor and he heard me, the door would swing open and he'd come in guns blazing. I'd always had a very vivid imagination, so much so that when Nan and Alan watched horror films, I could actually see Freddy Krueger stood behind Nan's chair watching me, and sometimes overlapping her face. Pat had to take me to the toilet, as I wouldn't go up the stairs on my own. Wenzel seemed in a good mood. He'd been hunting that day, shooting rabbits, and told us all the details when he got home. He got a rise out of telling us about the ferrets, that if you place a ferret and a rabbit in a hutch together, the ferret will kill the rabbit, and then eat its way through the rabbit from the inside outwards. He was pacing in front of us, and as he told the story, he was doing the hand movements as though actually holding up a rabbit. I didn't know if it was true, but I knew he was in a good mood. When he'd finished his show, he sat down and told Mum he was going to watch a film. "Bedtime, guys," Mum said. "Can I watch too?" I asked. He looked down at me, sat cross-legged on the floor, as though I shouldn't exist, and was somehow disturbed by his reality. How dare I talk? "You want to watch a film?" he asked, doing that thing again where he extends each word and the silence echoes. "She told you to go to bed, and you want to watch the fucking film. Who do you think you are?" he added. Jonathan was already halfway up the stairs. He'd given Mum a kiss and Caroline was following suit. She shot me a look. "Don't annoy him," it said. "Yeah, I thought we could watch it together," I asked, ignoring the "who do I think I am?" I didn't know who I was. I was happy not knowing. All I knew was my parents were gone, and they'd have let me watch it. "Put the kids to bed," he told Bernie. She didn't argue. I got up to go to bed. "Not you," he said. I stayed motionless, half stood, waiting for the impact. No one came. "You want to watch the film?" "You'll watch the fucking film," he said, walking into the kitchen. He came back with a wooden kitchen chair and pointed at it. I thought this was going to be fun. I was wrong. "Sit," he ordered. I did, nervously waiting for whatever he was going to do next. "Don't leave that chair, and don't take your eyes off that TV. I'll be checking on you, and if you move, you won't know what's hit you." He was calm, but he meant every word. He turned the light off and pulled the door mostly closed. The adverts were just finishing. I sat and watched Children of the Corn all the way through on my own. I don't recall what happens, but I've never watched it since. I was 8. It was a few days after, and definitely not the work of my overactive imagination. Wenzel was at work. I was upstairs on my bed playing Alex the Kid on the Master System Nan had got me for Christmas. I'd got it early because I'd been good. It was still early December. Nan had died in the November. I wasn't thinking about anything much, just lay there going over levels I'd completed 100 times before, when I felt the bed move down beside me, like someone had sat down. I could see just fine from my position, and presumed it was the cat, because we always had animals at Nan's. Then I realised Mum Wenzel didn't have a cat. I looked at the spot, and the bed was dipped as though someone was sat there. I felt Nan watching me. I knew she was there. I couldn't see her, just the spot where she sat. I didn't know what to do and carried on playing my game. Around 2 minutes passed by, which is a long time when you're concentrating on something you don't understand. I felt both peaceful and comfortable. I knew I was experiencing something magical. Suddenly the bed adjusted itself and Nan was gone. The room was empty again. I ran downstairs to Mum. She asked what's wrong. I waved her to the stairs where we always spoke in private, and I told her. "I've just seen something," I said. "Ah," she replied, not at all fazed. "What did you see?" she asked. I shook my head. My mum smiled, a real smile, quite possibly the first real smile I'd ever seen her have. She had a brown check shirt on and light-coloured jeans. "It's okay. She won't hurt you," she said, turning her head slightly. I let it out defensively. "It's Nan, of course she won't." Then I caught myself. "You've seen her?" I asked. My mum, a woman I only partly knew. I was looking into her eyes for the truth. "Yes, they won't hurt you. They can't," she said. And her eyes agreed. I smiled. "Now go and play. Let's not tell your dad, yeah?" She tapped my arm, and I shot off to play. I still hadn't drawn the conclusion Wenzel was abusive. In part because it was all normal to me. In part because I'd seen Caroline abused by Nan. And in part because my parents, in my mind, were Nan and Alan. And they always said he was crazy and not to upset him. I presumed therefore that it was okay that he was crazy. And it was equally okay that I couldn't stand him. I'd seen his ways and didn't want to be there. I was going to run away with the full knowledge that if he caught me, he'd kill me. I had no doubts about that in my mind. He would kill me. But if I got to Alan's before Wenzel, then Alan would protect me. I'd had the thought in my head for a few days. Can't remember why, but it had something to do with Wenzel calling me a bastard. I was 8 years old, but I knew what a bastard was. I'd replied, "I'm not a bastard. Alan's my dad." I don't remember what happened, but I knew it hurt. I knew I was leaving. I had it all planned out. I'd wait until Wenzel and Mum were busy just before food time. They always argued, or she'd cooked whilst he banged around getting gear to go fishing or hunting. Either way, it was the time I'd chosen because they were both occupied. He'd taken me fishing twice. I caught sticklebacks on Macclesfield Canal. I hated hurting animals. When I told him, he told me I'm no son of his. I know, I thought. I went for a walk down the canal by myself instead. The second time he took me, he wasn't happy about it. But Mum said I'd not been out in ages. We didn't go fishing. We went to a lady's house where I sat watching her fish tank in the living room. whilst he took her in the